Hey guys, Tyler Ansman here with Tyler Ansman Performance. So today we're going to talk about training to failure and its implications for throwing velocity. Okay, so next we have our physiological adaptations. All right, so first up we have fascicle length. So we know that a longer fascicle length is associated with higher velocity contractions, right? And this is because all of the sarcomeres, right, are going at the same time. So if we have a greater number of sarcomeres in series, right, they're all contracting at once. So if we have 10 versus 2, for example, our total kind of lengths per second, or however we want to kind of evaluate that, is going to be faster than if we have fewer in series, right? So fascicle length is an important has important implications for throwing velocity, and not something that is very positively affected by training to failure. Next, fiber type shifts, right? So we have kind of two basic categories of muscle fiber types. So we have type 1, or your slow twitch muscle fibers, and then we have type 2. Within type 2, though, we have kind of two main subcategories. So we have type 2A, right, which are what you will get a lot of as you train in the weight room more. And then we have type 2X, which are the absolute kind of fastest that we have. And what tends to happen is the more fatigue that's present when you're training, the more those type 2X fibers kind of shift to type 2A. And so to kind of put a reference on it, like how much faster the type 2X are than type 2A. So the type 2X have shortening velocities of roughly 5 to 6 kind of fiber lengths per second. Type 2As are about 3 to 4. And then type 1s are half to 1 fiber length per second. And these are all kind of thanks to Chris Beardsley. But so you can see there's a pretty significant difference between all of these. So we obviously want the fastest contraction velocity we can. Next, stiffness and connective tissue adaptations, right? So in order to kind of transfer the most energy possible as efficiently as possible, elastic energy storage and utilization, all of these things are important things to think about when we're talking about throwing velocity. A lot of times we need kind of stiffer tendons and connective tissue, and this tends to not happen by training to failure. It tends to happen through high velocity loading and very heavy loading. Those are kind of how we get those adaptations. So doesn't lend itself necessarily very well to training to failure. Okay, so finally we got pinnation angle. So basically the more obtuse the pinnation angle is, means the fewer sarcomeres in series, right? So we kind of talked about why that's important up here with fascicle length. And what that means is there's more in parallel, and so we're capable of producing, or that muscle is capable of producing greater forces but lower velocities, right? So you can see how we want to affect the pinnation angle in a very specific way when we're talking about kind of maximizing throwing velocity. Okay, so training to failure has been popular, with gym bros and bodybuilders for a long time. And the reason being, there are some positive effects related to hypertrophy. But training to failure is really much more important when it comes to training with light loads, because we don't get kind of that maximal activation level of the high threshold motor units that we talked about in the beginning. And the reason that's important is because we want to maximize the activation level of those high threshold motor units, because they contain our type 2 fibers, which have the greater potential for hypertrophy. All right, so when we're training with light loads, we probably, if we're going to try to maximize hypertrophy, training to failure would be important. This is not something we would do if we're trying to train for throwing velocity, but that's why it's done. When you start moving very heavy loads, right, or moving as fast as possible, we maximally activate those high threshold motor units off the bat on rep 1. And so it becomes significantly less important when we're lifting with very heavy loads to train to failure, because we can get those very kind of high levels of activation without kind of getting close to the proximity of failure. All right.